Back on Talking Democracy with Rebecca Zepick from State of the State, Kansas. And before the break, we were talking a little bit about adventures in the state capitol. What is the state of news coverage in a state like Kansas, do you think? Are we well served, or is there significant room for improvement in the quality of information that goes out to people?
You know, I think that I'm probably not qualified to talk about the print journalism world or the radio world. I think that they, both have some strengths and some weaknesses as the market has changed. I can talk about broadcast, which is television, basically. And what I've noticed, because I do work at Cake TV down in Wichita, is that there are decisions that the news director has to make about the viewing audience that he has to hit the widest possible target. And it is true that not everybody in town wants to know what's going on at the State House, and a lot of people want to know what happened at that big car accident down the street, or if there's a big fundraiser for a charitable thing. And so at some point, news directors, I think in TV stations, many of them made a decision to stop covering the State House. And oftentimes when I was up at the Capitol, TV cameras would come over. There often was not a reporter, it was a photographer who literally was aiming cameras kind of in different directions and talking to the wrong people, and I would say, why did you talk to him? Like the majority leader was right there, and they struggled. I mean, they were doing the best they could, but they really didn't have a background in knowledge. And when you're talking about politics, people will spin anything. And so as a reporter, you become much more savvy about, well, here's a person who will be honest about the situation. Or, this is the spin, which is fine, but you may need to help the viewer understand a little bit that this is a position someone's taking.
And that's where the reporter really comes into play, is having someone who can cut through the spin and give a more factual interpretation, is what you're saying? Right.
An example would be the recent smoking ban that was passed last session. Both sides said their bill was in the best possible health interest of Kansas. And while I don't have a position as a reporter, I can say that certainly one of the bills, the one that actually ended up passing, had the support of the American Cancer Society, the Heart Association, all those sort of health organizations were behind it. The other one did not, and some said there were more loopholes in it, and there were some, there was a casino exception even in the more strict one. But both parties would tell you that their health care bill, their smoking ban bill, was the best and the best health-wise. And so as a reporter, you had to kind of look back and see who had endorsed this bill and who hadn't. So there's an example of needing a reporter who's at least kind of got that ear to the ground.
I think a lot of people have kind of lost sight of that, especially as the internet has changed the nature of journalism and reportage, and you see a lot more bloggers, what's now being called the citizen journalist movement out there. And there's still a role for the reporter, isn't there? I think you just pointed out where you really need someone with some background. Would you say that reporters generally lack the political knowledge that they need to do good political stories, or is it more a problem with the market?
I think, it's hard because in politics, you cover everything. You cover education one day, you cover health issues the next, and you can't have a specialty, in all of those. You have to know sources who are reliable and where to go to fact check things. I think that's part of it. I think citizen journalism could work as long as that blogger or citizen reporter is willing to say, look, I don't really know everything about this. I need to do my homework, or certainly I need to find credible sources to know who to rely on. And it's a challenge for any reporter, Yeah.
And I think it's important to point out that you mentioned you had worked on John McCain's 2008 presidential campaign and then went to take some journalism classes. You didn't come from a journalism background, is that right? Right,
that's right. I'm actually an attorney, and which someone asked me once, should I go to law school to be a reporter? And I was like, gosh, no, don't do that. But one thing I was good is, as a lawyer, you have to be able to understand both sides. And we are nonpartisan at State of the State, and our news hopefully reflects that. And so you do have to look at both sides. And actually, in a weird way, when you get in deep, you start to realize that the things you assumed to be true weren't. And so I've been really fortunate to work with kind of not just both parties, but people that probably don't even identify themselves in a party anymore.
One of the things that I've noticed, let's talk about this in a frame that's very particular to the area that we here at Talking Democracy serve, and that's the communities of Western Kansas.
Sure.
We are dominated by the Wichita media market, and you've got a situation where only one of the major affiliates has an arm here in Hayes, and there's very few reporters on the ground out here in Western Kansas. A lot of people see there being promise in the citizen journalism movement in providing news content out here, because there's not a lot of attention being paid out here. Do you think that that is something that State of the State and similar avenues can provide for these underserved news markets?
I completely do. You know, I mean, for a a couple, maybe $10,000 to $15,000, you can set up something that sort of replicates what looks like a broadcast news website. You know, now you don't have a TV signal, you don't have a satellite feed, but you can cover your local stuff. And there's a movement actually that I kind of heard about, like hyper-local journalism, which is, you know, sometimes the people who know what's going on in the neighborhood best are the people who are the block leaders of the neighborhood, and they don't have to have a reporting background to let the town know what's going on in their street. But I do think that you're right. It's not fair that an entire chunk of the state, all of Western Kansas, is really served by the Wichita market to a large degree, and so little coverage goes on, because so much does happen out in Western Kansas that's unique. And even when I sit at the Cake News Desk, it's hard for me to find the stock of video to go on a grain story that but I think it would just be automatic for something like an agricultural story for Western Kansas.